At 4:30 p.m. on Monday, May 12th, and we'll do a roll call. So I do it. Dostart is here. Fisher. Here. Howe. Lively. Here. At Meridew. Yes. Tonelli is a little late, and then David here. And Councilmember DeGolia told us he would not be here. It's his birthday today. He's going to the Giants game with his wife. And
good choice.
and, oh, so you're taking, Gordon, are you taking notes here? Then? And then Lewis.
Here.
Great. We will now open for public comments. Are there any public comments? Seeing as there are no public comments, we will close public comments. Now we're on to the regular agenda. And the first item will be the discussion of the Civic Center Project Manager RFP, discussion and review of staff report to council. Gordon, would you lead us on this, please?
I'd be happy to. What you have before you is a draft staff report to the committee, which...
Can I get a copy?
Oh, certainly. Does anyone else need copies?
We already have.
Of course. With minor changes and incorporation of any comments from the committee, we'll go to the city manager and then for his approval and then to city council next week. The report and mainly the attached RFP represents collaborative work by the committee with a great big nod to Clyde, who did most of the initial work, and I was able to make just minor changes to it. But, the credit goes to him, the blame, if there's any, goes to me. And the purpose of the project manager is to provide technical assistance for the town in really three phases. During the initial phase, environmental and design, someone to provide input in terms of is there a better way in the contract to make sure that the architect is focused on doing the project that we want? During the construction, then, it would be conceived that this individual would be there daily, if not full-time, depending on the need, perhaps as much as half-time, but they're providing the daily contractor oversight, not supervision, that's provided by the contractor, but oversight in terms of the contractor following the plans, any change orders, and issues that come up that inevitably do, plus making sure that the site is operated in a safe manner. And then giving this committee and me periodic reports, probably weekly for project management reports, and then monthly for a slightly higher level overview, tracking the project's cost and the project's schedule to make sure that it stays on track. Then at the final phase would be at the conclusion of the project to assure that the buildings are commissioned, which means you turn them on and make sure the air is clear and the water works and everything functions as it's supposed to. And then all the documentation, which is voluminous, is properly prepared and turned over to the town, and the project is finished. Costs are tallied, any issues, claims are resolved, and then the town uses the building. So it's really a more technical level of work, working under my supervision and direction to provide that higher or the more detailed level of construction knowledge and experience.
Gordon, can I jump in for saying for a framework? Sure. So the big picture framework, since we haven't all been together for a month, is the so where are we in the project? We've been approved, the site plan's been approved as a general concept. The next big step is hiring an architect. And just to back us up a month, we decided that staff, so the committee felt that it would be a good idea to hire a project manager to be on board during the onboarding of the architect. so that they could be involved in how are we gonna manage the architect, value engineering, that sort of thing. So the first step we're doing is project manager and some associated people that need to be up front, geotech and that sort of thing. Then the next step will be architect. Then we do our preliminary design committee outreach around while separately money's being raised. And then it will all come back together, come back to council, and to get approved or not, to proceed with the project. So this is step one of a two-step project, which is project manager, then architect. For designs, just to put it back, why we hire a project manager this early, the thought will be we'll do a more effective job hiring an architect and managing that process, and we have this person on board.
Good.
Okay.
So with that, I think the goal is, are there any questions about this particular RFP? Any discussion people would like to have?
Okay, I have a bunch of questions, so if I ask too many, shut me up. My first question is, what are we expecting to pay this person? Do we have any kind of parameters? What are we expecting? Because it says here it's from now until we're finished, which would be maybe in a good time, 3 years, could be 4 or 5 years. So, what are we expecting? And George, this looks like the timing starts in August. And who's going to pay this person? Those are my first two questions.
From a funding perspective, the proportionality of the library, the general fund money connected to the building department fund, and the private donation component of the project. We haven't yet hired the architect, so up until the point that we hired the architect, we can expend general fund money on the project. This person is not the architect for the project. But the minute that architect is on board and they have any hand in that, general fund money's got to stop, and it's got to come from one of those other 3 buckets in proportion. We can advance funds from the building department fund or the library fund in proportion to those, and then pay them back in an accounting function. It's easy to do, but that's where it's going to
Okay,
go.
and so not having seen the timeline on the RFP for the architect, I'm guessing that's like September,
That's after this one.
October.
We want their input into that.
Yeah, okay, so we'll be able to fund the beginning of this job already, which is a good thing. And this project manager will be available once we have a contract and start working with them to work with this committee on ideas that could save us some money already before we talk to an architect. For example, there are other ways I've been told of building garage that will save us a lot of money. And I'm ready to talk to a project manager about this to see if it works. Like under the green place instead of under the building, because you don't have all the venting to do. Anyway, that's not on our agenda. But there's things like that that I think we ought to be talking to someone who knows something about it before we start designing the building.
That's one of the functions of this.
Right. So they'll start with this.
And Didi also asked about cost.
We have, in the cost estimate that we
Yes.
had, which was kind of a high-level budget estimate, there was an estimate in there which is incorporated in the total, $32.8 million project. We also talked about it as the subcommittee, and Rose, Steve, and Clive. And before I give you a number, there's sort of 2 components. One is time, because they're going to be here, the longer they're here, the more you're going to expect to spend. But also, the other is there's a function to be done. If there's writing or assisting, because I'll probably write the architectural RFP, but assisting with that is sort of a finite function. It doesn't necessarily take 5 months to do that. It's, come on in, here it is, we'll spend 3 hours and go over it and give me your input. So the fact that the project may run longer doesn't necessarily mean more cost. If the construction runs longer, there's probably more costs involved in there. But I think we came up with a number probably in the 3 to 4% range.
Right.
Of the, but by the way, if I may, the way I'm proposing to write the RFP would not be on a percentage basis, but rather on an hourly basis. So if we say, we only need you, for this number of hours over the next 6 months while we're doing X, then that's what we pay. It's not, gee, the project costs more, your fee goes up.
Yeah, so as Gordon said, the way that these firms are calculated, it'll be like with the architecture. They won't do it on a percentage of possible cost. They'll look at the type of people that have to go on, the fully loaded salary costs associated with that person, how many hours for each phase. So they'll give Gordon a spreadsheet that'll show how much they expect this to cost. But the estimate that was originally included was 4% of construction cost, none of the 32 million, but of construction cost, which was in the low 20s somewhere. And we expect that we'll be able to come in below that number.
On a not to exceed.
Yeah, I hope so. Okay.
And it's determinable, it's hourly. So if we get in and something happens in the project, we terminate, or if we don't like the person, we terminate. They're not guaranteed the project.
Right.
Well, now, as I read this, this is a kind of all-inclusive, day one till project ends for this project management services. But after getting the lecture from the city attorney last month, is this legal? Is this one person, can this one person
It's a
be
firm.
involved?
It is a firm. It's not
Okay, this entity, can this entity be involved through all these phases?
Yes, they don't have a hand in the project's design, the expansion of services, and it's a not to exceed contract.
And they are precluded specifically, and notice in bold in the RFP, they're specifically precluded from being a member of either the design team or most particularly the construction team. And this is different than private industry might
I
do.
want the oversight of the
Yeah.
design team.
Absolutely. Their role is, as you say, to provide us with input that says, tell the architect not to use, marble because it's cheaper to use slip form concrete, whatever, something like that.
More, did that answer your question?
So far,
Any other questions you'd like to ask?
not yet.
I'm curious, you're saying this is an entity, so are there consultants in a separate organization that we're hiring that would come in just on an hourly need? And you could just have them come and go and,
Yes, but it depends on who's available and the skill level. There may be somebody from a firm, and these are typical firms like this may also do construction, but that doesn't mean they only do construction because they have people, and they don't win every bid. So they have a project manager that may not be assigned to actually run a project for which they're building, but they know building, so they could be available for this. And it may be the person who comes in that works initially with the design might be different than the person who necessarily comes in when they're actually providing the direct oversight of construction. And they may bring somebody else in at the end on commissioning.
is that a good thing? To have different people
Yes,
instead of
because
one person?
it can be a good thing, or there may be during construction, they may say, you don't need the guy at $200 an hour. We've got an inspector who's a crackerjack on this, and he's $147 an hour.
Christine's asking, is there a team leader?
Yeah,
we're
that's watching the whole thing.
We're buying the firm who has the responsibility to provide the people, even if, as sometimes happens, that person leaves that firm. and
But they
goes
would
to somebody
designate
else.
a team leader.
Yeah, they'd have
So
somebody as
somebody's
HR.
following it from start to finish and
Well,
making
it
sure all
may
the
not be,
I's are dotted
you know,
and T's are crossed.
Cannot guarantee it's a single individual, because, they can't, indentured servitude went out a while ago. But, they'll say, we'll designate this person as our, as the person in charge, and barring any other, changes, that person is gonna be involved, but they may not be here every day or do every phase of the project.
Short answer is yes.
Yes. A babysitter, so to speak,
Wait,
is what I'm
well, that's a-
wondering.
that's
That
a
seems like that's
question.
what we're
When
paying
we're
for.
interviewing the firms, that's not the question.
It's just like when we hired
Master plan.
Cheryl.
Right,
Right. They
You get a team and they,
different times.
Cheryl left
Yeah,
the firm. She's off on her own now, but she stuck with him through our project.
Yeah, that's a good example, right? So we didn't see anything that was happening behind the scenes. As far as we were concerned, it was just Cheryl was doing the whole thing by herself. We know that she wasn't. There were 20 other people back in the office doing everything else, but we didn't see those. So it'll be the same.
More questions?
Yeah, I've got one. You said, I think I read in there that this chap firm or whatever will assist you in writing the RFP, right?
Yeah, well, probably I'll actually do the draft of the RFP and then have someone look at it and say, gee, I'd suggest, you change this section to, to emphasize this, or tell them you want this particular capability, or rewrite that, that section to define something. And one area that I would specifically look for their recommendations is on the form of contract for the architect. And Rose can tell you, there's the American Institute for Architects has a standard form of engagement for architects. Most municipalities don't use it.
Another, next question is, I think I also read that this firm will assist in the architect selection. Is that true? Is that right?
That's the proposal.
And what that means is they will give their feedback on what they've heard about the firm. Do they see professional, if they've talked, they can go out and do some reference checking too.
So it's more of the reference check kind of thing. That's
Do they get a vote?
Maybe.
No.
That's up
No,
to
they
this
don't.
committee, probably
They're a
not.
hired gun.
Yeah.
They're,
They
Just
would
like
make
you may remember
recommendations
when
to
you did the
us.
selection of the architects,
Just make
I didn't
recommendations.
vote. My job is here as staff to you.
It's
the
clear they
only
don't
people
get a
who really
vote.
get a vote are council, so.
Well, but I think
We don't
in
get
terms
a
of,
vote.
in terms of
Well,
recommendations,
We get a vote on the selection of the, and recommendation.
We got to recommend somebody.
correct, it was only the
Uh,
CCAC
yeah.
members, not even the council liaisons voted on that process.
Yeah, but they go after.
It's really, the way I think of the project manager is an extension of Gordon. Gordon isn't a contract, Gordon won't have the capacity to see this through, given what he's doing in his life, and this is a full-time project manager. Leverage is Gordon.
It's like
Well-
it is Atherton.
Right. No, I mean, like I met with the finance director today, and there are about 16 capital projects in addition to other things that I'm working on. So I doubt that I would be able to focus as well on just this project. And this is a significant sized project.
And one of the things that we're also, we've put in as a selection criteria in the RFP is the firm that we select has to have in-house capabilities for cost estimating. And that was one of the things that went wrong with the design process, is that they had cost estimating, but it was completely disconnected from the design team. So they weren't talking to one another through the process. So we want to make sure that this project management firm has that cost estimating capability in-house, not something that they're getting on the outside.
Yeah, the idea of having someone from Boise tell us what it was going to cost.
Yeah, right.
More questions or discussion?
I think you guys have done a good job.
All right. Do we, unless anyone's opposed, do we want to have a motion to go ahead and approve this?
Is the motion to pass it on to the city council? I so move.
I'll say that.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Abstaining? Thank you. Great, next item is review and discussion of the RFP for the Civic Center environmental document preparation and geotech engineering. So this, Gordon, if I remember, is largely to get the EIR
Yes.
background going, and geotech is to help us know, can we really build an underground garage here?
Right,
That sort of thing.
Yeah, that's.
It's the only area of the preliminary process that ties well in with the environmental work that would not necessarily come with the environmental planning firm. So it's, and wanting to get going, because things like groundwater levels determine whether you can do even an underground, whatever, or what you have to do with a foundation. And because of the presence of the police department, the building requirements are higher than for a regular commercial building or a residential structure. So it's probably, it's the most critical of the initial design elements. So it would be folded in with the environmental review, but because it's a technical aspect of it, I actually wrote the RFP, but it will be presented by the town planner.
So is
for the geotechnical. And then the environmental is, that RFP was written by the town planner.
Is the town planner doing the EIR and then the technical stuff?
So the town planner's hiring,
These people, that's
These
the way I
people.
thought I read it, so I'm
Correct.
thinking.
they go out to do it, and they work as staff, just like I would, to evaluate. The deputy town planner suggested that a member of this committee would want to sit on the panel to observe the selection process.
And it's a very small question. Why have we changed from RFQ to RFP? Is there any significance behind that?
She wrote it as an RFQ.
And also the project management one is also an RFP now.
The RFP is more focused on a particular issue as opposed to the RFQ, which could be more generic.
I see. Okay. So if you were hiring an attorney for a number of different things, and you wanted it on an hourly basis, that would be an RFP.
Or because there's probably far fewer firms that would do either project management or environmental planning, we can do an RFP and narrow it down more. For architecture, you might want to do an RFQ that tends to be more broad, and then ask, once you've narrowed it down, ask them to be more specific in a proposal after the interview process.
And we're doing this, not doing it internally, outsourcing it for, what's the thing? Just because we don't do a lot of these?
We don't really have the capacity
Not something
internally
else.
to do that. The planners work in a review capacity.
So I have a question.
Yes,
So,
please.
How much of the previous EIR will be used?
They're suggesting that a lot of it can be used, especially the library EIR had a lot of information. Even though this was an alternate site, they still had to do the analysis, so.
And that would go into also
Absolutely.
the town center?
Correct.
Component?
Yes.
Mhm. Would you be going out to the same pool of consultants?
I can't answer that because I'm not the one that's going to be
It would be
issuing
publicly
it.
distributed, they would certainly be on the list, I'm
Right,
sure.
I would expect so, but typically, we advertise on the town website and contact any firms that we're aware of. I mean, I'm not, as I say, I'm not doing this one, so it may be, there may be a half a dozen
list
firms
or something?
in the area that we would expect to
I
receive it.
have the same question about the project manager, the pool of candidates.
That one, fortunately, there's, the subcommittee has 3 knowledgeable individuals, actually ladies first. And I've asked that they provide me with a list of firms that they would
Targeted.
suggest. And I'm aware of probably a half a dozen firms that I would add to that list.
You would just.
And we'd at least let them know that it's
information
available,
from-
but also put it on the web.
Okay.
And there are firms for this kind of work,
Mhm.
there are 2 or 3 firms that tend to track public projects.
Mhm, mhm.
And,
I know we've had, a public firm.
yeah, someone from block construction came a couple of times, but there are others just in this area. One of the, by the way, you may notice, one of the requirements is that a firm be located within 50 miles of here. Because especially if they're not going to be stationed here, working full-time, but we have a question that comes up, it's a lot easier to get somebody out of an office in, Oakland or San Jose than if they're
In
much
Reading.
in Reading or Los Angeles. I mean, I know when we did the city hall in San Jose, we had, a world-class architect out of Los Angeles.
Mhm.
And so it wasn't as easy to get answers some of the time.
Okay.
But Elizabeth, speaking of block, I think we mentioned when he was here that day, I think they're probably interested in the construction part of it and not the project management, so.
That's not what he told me.
Really?
He said we wouldn't be interested in the construction, we'd
Oh, wow.
be interested in the project
That's
management.
Which is fine.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
But they know they're
And I
probably.
said, so you mostly do schools, don't you? And he says,
Yeah.
well, kind of a misperception, you know, we do a lot
We'll
of
see what the
other
resume
things
is.
too, right?
But we are specifically asking for their ability to manage and experience with public projects.
Public projects, yeah.
Different than offices, not because the construction itself is different, although for the police station, it does have some
The
characteristics.
processes.
But the processes are different, the funding is different, the laws governing the process are different.
Okay.
And then this will be one where there's not an easy channel like the AIA chapters, distribution list.
Mhm.
So people know, people send it,
Mhm.
good
I think
ideas.
I've been given
when it comes
one or
out
two
for-
names. Can I give them to you?
Yes,
Okay, they're at home, I didn't bring them.
yeah, or give Nick Gordon, that one, yeah.
Well, I know a project manager had been chosen by the library.
Yes, and that firm would be one of the ones that I would contact.
Okay.
Do you know how they were chosen? I mean, on what basis?
Do you know how?
Yes, because actually, I was
one of the candidates.
I was one of the proposers. Wisely did not pick me, but it was,
We don't get to choose, we don't get to participate now, except on this side.
right, exactly. We got the better job. But it was, there were 9 firms solicited. I can't tell you, maybe Tom, you know how all the names came out, but there were 9 firms that maybe more solicited, but 9 firms that responded, 4 were shortlisted, and then they selected that firm.
So any other questions on this document? Anybody like that?
Yeah, the RFP identifies that they're either going to be doing the mitigated May or in EIR. When are they going to decide? How do they?
They'll be deciding that on the basis of their analysis. Until they actually determine, for example, we know that the library building is over 50 years old. We know that this building is over 50 years old. But not, we're not planning to demolish this building, but we are planning to demolish the library building. So they'll have to determine
So the
whether
candidates
that
are going
is,
to determine. Is
they'll,
that what you're saying?
based on their analysis,
Wow.
they'll have to look at the historical records, documents, and make a recommendation.
After they're chosen or as part of their proposal?
After the show.
Probably after they're
They have to
chosen,
do the
because
analysis first.
Part of the
Yeah,
work,
I
yeah.
mean, yeah, so.
How
okay.
That's the
Yeah, how do you,
process,
how do
though.
you, yeah, bid on something
Yeah,
when
because
the
it's
magnitude is
two different
different?
levels of requirements.
Yeah,
I would say not significant, because a mitigated negative deck actually gives you some more flexibility. The council can decide, hey, there are overriding considerations, and we're okay. Versus or rather the AIR, the MND may restrict the city a little bit more. But that's something they can determine based on the record. And also the input.
But they'll also probably bid it in a way that says if you mitigated negative deck is required,
right.
here's what the
I can
cost
see
is.
that. I
If
can see that.
if a full-blown EIR is required, here's the cost.
Yeah, up front.
And we although the ones that I've done, we always have a separate cost envelope. I'm not sure, and I'll talk to Lisa about it, that they're planning to do the same thing. But nevertheless, we negotiate a fee based on the scope of work after they submit. It's not, this is different than construction. Construction, it's governed by the Public Contracts Code, which says you pick low bid. That is not the same for professional services.
Is this how it's always written up, either or?
I
When they go out?
can't answer that. No, I actually, I guess, no, it is not always written that way. Sometimes in advance, it's going to require an EIR. So you'd write that. In this case, based on what the planner knows, she thought it might possibly be able to be done with a mitigated negative declaration. It's usually considered a lower threshold.
Yeah.
And even though the building is historic by virtue of its age, it will not necessarily rise to that level if in the public scoping meeting, nobody says, oh, that's, I remember that building from whenever, and it was designed by so-and-so, and it's really important.
Only part of it.
Only it's part of
Right,
it.
only part of
it.
But still, because that part is
It was
proposed to
not
be demolished.
designed by.
No, it was a private residence, I guess.
I mean, there's
But-
no.
Police chief.
Yeah. Some police, but like this building, it's come to my attention that it's a Birch Park design building. Do we have any records? That's
Sure, there's something like that.
I'm Alto, huh?
Does Marion have any?
We should ask her.
Yeah.
You know, she should.
That's never
Yeah,
come up.
it should be consulted
But, you
as
know,
part
a
of the
Burge,
EIR.
you know, it certainly looks like a Burge Clark building to me. If you look at the Palo Alto Post Office, which is a Burge Clark building, and, you know, some of his other work. To me, that's pretty significant.
It is.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions on the environmental project? Should we move this on to a motion?
You want a motion to pass this on to the city council?
Please, second.
Second it.
Thank you, Christine, great. All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed or abstaining? There you have it. Launch it out. Okay, item number 5, ad hoc committee reports and formation of other ad hoc committees.
Before we move to that,
Yeah.
can I just ask one more question? You indicated that the environmental consultant was beneficial for both the project management work that we want to start moving on, as well as the EIR. And so that's why you were recommending bringing them on at an early phase. Are there any other consultants that would fit in that category, for instance?
The geotechnical, I wrote in the same way,
Okay.
that we have the capability of continuing their work on into the design, since they're working for the town. But the work, as the city manager said, we would not negotiate the contract for the design at this point. It'd probably be an option to be exercised at some future point.
And things, consultants like a full survey, that's already underway or has been completed?
The survey actually was already done, I don't know how many years ago. It was actually presented as part of the master plan.
Okay. Right, and arborists and things like that?
The arborist report,
That's all part of the EIR?
well, it's part of the, no, actually, the arborist report was done
Master.
almost a year ago, and that was, and it is an appendix to the master plan.
Okay, on ad hoc committee reports, I need help remembering what our ad hoc committees are, other than project management.
There's an outreach ad hoc committee,
Uh-huh.
consisting of Clive, myself, and Paul.
Library.
There's the library ad hoc committee.
There's a budget ad hoc committee.
There was the.
Budget,
But
master plan, but that's done.
But that's
for
done,
now.
yeah. Some ad hoc
Budget's sort of
committees.
done for,
That was
okay.
yeah.
Okay, so the two that we should talk about today are gonna be project management and outreach, probably, right? That makes sense. On outreach, the question I would pose for this group and for that subcommittee is, not outreach, but do we have one that's PR? Is that outreach?
That's
That's
outreach.
So what role should they have, what role should that group have with these completely separate fundraising committee? That's what's been on my mind lately, is do they interface, do they not? Who's developing materials? How does it get paid
The
for?
fundraising committee is developing message, what the message will be, what it will look like, what's the stuff that's gonna go out to the town. And I think it's pretty important that we are all on the same page
Right.
with the message, the look and feel, and the questions and answers that may be asked that need to be answered. And